I do believe this regulation we're discussing today is EPA's most blatant overreach thus far, and there have been a number of them. But first, let me just observe from the poster that the ranking member displayed earlier, listing 3 headlines from national newspapers and saying it's official. I was reminded of a scene from the movie The King's Speech, in which the speech therapist Lionel Logue is talking to King George, and one of the things Lionel says is, "You need to quit smoking." And King George says, "My doctors tell me smoke relaxes the throat." And Lionel says, "Well, they're all a bunch of idiots." The king replies, "They've all been knighted." And Lionel replies, "Then it's official." So to say that we've got some headlines from the Washington Post and other newspapers, and that makes it official, I would just observe these were the smartest people in Britain at the time, and they were giving the King of England exactly the wrong advice about what he should be doing with regard to smoking. It is possibly conceivable that the smartest people of our time might be wrong, and that some of the very learned and educated contrarians on the issue of climate change will turn out to be vindicated in the end. Let me also, I think you will agree, Ms. McCabe, that when my colleagues on the other side of the aisle talk about carbon pollution, it's a new term that's been coined over the last several years. They're not talking about smog. They're not talking about carbon particles in the air. They're talking about CO2, carbon dioxide. So it sounds so sinister and polluting and dirty and slimy, carbon pollution, but actually they're talking about carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide doesn't cause lung disease in children. It doesn't cause asthma. Carbon dioxide hasn't been shown to cause children to miss school. And so I just want the public and the people listening to this, both in the hearing room and perhaps on television, to understand when we're using this term, this dirty sounding term, carbon pollution, we're talking about nothing other than carbon dioxide. Now let me ask you, Madam Administrator, about minimum incremental capital costs and the remaining useful life of coal-fired facilities. The Clean Air Act says that the agency is supposed to consider the remaining useful life of existing sources that they are proposing to regulate. Now, the Mississippi Development Authority says that the minimum incremental capital cost of Mississippi of this rule, if it's implemented as it is written now, will be $14.2 billion. And that's mainly, that the cost will be mainly constructing, generating facilities that we don't need right now under the current law and under the current regulations. Your own impact analysis says that over 50,000 megawatts of coal-fired plants across the country will have to be retired because of the rule. Many of these plants in Mississippi are already, they've spent billions of dollars to come into compliance with EPA rules, and they are now in compliance. And yet, because of the new rules, they will have to retire anyway, irrespective of the fact that they have years of remaining useful life. So tell me how your proposal considers the remaining useful lives of these coal plants if the rule will, in fact, force them to retire prematurely.
Well, thank you, Senator, for the question. Of course, the rule does not require any particular plant to take any particular action. We looked across the industry, across the country, at the age of plants. The average age of coal-fired plants is, I believe, over 40 years. So there are a lot of plants that have certainly lived out or are close to living out their remaining useful life, and we understand that decisions are being made, business decisions are being made by utilities about how to proceed with those plants. Remaining useful life is absolutely something that we are to take into account, and we did so in the proposal, and we will do so in the final, further informed by all the input that we've gotten. We were very mindful of not putting states in the position of stranding assets, and in particular, the types of plants that you yourself just mentioned, ones that have recently invested in pollution control equipment and are expected to produce electricity in a controlled way into the future. One of the reasons that we have, again, a long trajectory in the plan is to take into account those sorts of considerations. Another reason that the plan is so flexible.
How long is that trajectory?
The final compliance date is 2030. But the states, in planning over that period of time, are able to make their own choices about what to do. And if they have a plant that is that has many years remaining of its remaining useful life, has been recently upgraded, they certainly have the ability to continue operating that plant. In fact, our projections are that in 2030, still 30% of the power in this country would be produced by coal plants. We expect and assume that coal plants will continue to operate even through and after these plans are fully in place.
But if the only way my state of Mississippi can achieve the CO2 emission targets is to close these coal plants, are you saying that we will be able to work with your agency to avoid this and to keep those coal plants in use during their remaining useful life?
I don't know whether that is the situation in your state, but we certainly would be happy to have that conversation with the environmental and utility regulators in your state, and indeed we may have already done so. My staff has been spending a lot of time on the phone with states to understand why that is their conclusion, see what our reaction to that is, and see whether the flexibilities we have built into the proposal can provide a path for them.
Well, it's my understanding that among the numerous items of input that you've received during the time of this is some 3 million comments from around the country, and among those are comments from people in Mississippi who would have to comply with this, and what they're saying is flexibility sounds great, but if the only way we can achieve this goal is to shut down our power plants, then we have no flexibility at all. And I have to go back to what the people on the ground in Mississippi are telling me, and that is that we are going to have to, in short order, close down the entire current coal fired production in Mississippi. And so I hope what you're saying is true, but it seems to me that this is absolutely going to be a regulatory nightmare for electric providers, for users, and for working families in the state of Mississippi, and I hope we can avoid this with something more reasonable.